Thursday night, so you know what that means. It's time for the At Issue panel. Plenty to talk about this week, from the dilemma over how to handle those allegations of misconduct by two MPs to the results of Monday's by-elections and what they may tell us about what lies ahead. Chantal, Bruce, and Andrew are all right here tonight. So the biggest news we have to make of all tonight is that, Andrew, you're off Twitter. With your thousands of subscribers and tens of thousands of followers. This is big news. We're going to miss you very much.
Well, I canceled my magazine subscriptions as well, so it's not that big a deal.
So you're going to spend all your time here talking with us?
All my time, yeah.
Well, let's get to the issues we want to talk about tonight. The first one, the MPs. It's been 2 weeks now since Justin Trudeau suspended the two Liberal MPs. We still don't know what the allegations are. We still don't know who made them, but it seems kind of like a bit of limbo we're in here. What's going on?
You tell me. We don't have named accusers. We don't know what the specific allegations are, and we don't have a formal complaint. On top of which, we don't have a process for dealing with this, and we don't even seem to have a process for coming up with a process. What we have, as of a day or two ago, is we have the Speaker saying he could possibly initiate some sort of third-party investigation, but only if he gets a formal complaint. The NDP MPs won't come forward, and so we're left in a situation where the Liberal MPs have been suspended. There's no investigation in process to determine their guilt or innocence. And in the middle of all this void, we have people now coming out of the shadows, if you will, to offer their contributions on this in ways that are only adding to the confusion. We have Craig Scott, the NDP MP, a law professor, being reported to have told Liberal MPs that one of these incidents, met the criminal definition, or the definition of sexual assault. At the same time, we have Françoise Boivin, the NDP justice critic, saying, well, Trudeau shouldn't have even suspended them. He should have just given them a warning. Given them a warning for actions that met the definition of criminal assault. It's just utter confusion. We need to clear this up fast.
Chantal?
What we do know is that these complaints do have a face. They do have a face for Justin Trudeau. It wasn't an anonymous email that said so-and-so did something. They're confidential tales, but they do have faces to them, and we do know that Justin Trudeau thought it was serious enough to suspend two MPs. Beyond that, in as much as these two women, one of whom came forward and talked to Justin Trudeau about this, which the Liberals are treating as getting a complaint from someone. In as much as they won't come forward, the House of Commons is powerless to have a process. So I figure the ball is in Justin Trudeau's court as a leader to decide how he deals with these MPs. And the line to keep MPs, for the record, is not that they're convicted of criminal code offences, it's that they don't fit with whatever values that the leader feels that he has. It may be arbitrary, but that is the way that parties deal with their own. And at this point, this is going to get dealt with within the Liberal Party.
It's so hard, Bruce, for people off the Hill to understand that there doesn't appear to be an obvious process to follow it. It's quite the riddle.
Yeah, it has something to do with the structure, the nature of the fact that these are 300-odd people who come to Ottawa without bosses, effectively. The people who elected them are their bosses. And so they organize their lives and conduct themselves in the way that they see fit. And they don't really report to anybody from the standpoint of their personal conduct. Obviously, the leaders do have some role in that. It's a painful thing to watch, what's going on right now. And personally, I think it would be better for everybody if, despite the instinct that some have to know more now, to let this matter proceed with an element of secrecy or privacy. Let me put it that way. The point is not secrecy, it's privacy. I do see in Ottawa right now a great deal of tension between the Liberals and the New Democrats. You can't talk to them about anything else without that coming up. It's a real sore point for them. And I'm not sure exactly why. I do think that on balance, the Liberals did the only thing that they could have done, and I think the NDP are probably not making much progress in trying to make the case that the Liberals have done something heinous here to re-victimize.
What about the individuals? I mean, what do they do? Their names their reputations have been harmed.
Yes, but the problem, and here is the problem. Once an MP comes to you as a party leader to say, this happened to me, and you're Justin Trudeau or any leader, are you supposed to then say, well, I don't know this? We spent amounts of ink saying,
But why can't they
you
hire an
can't
outside
put-
investigator and let them back into the caucus until that's, I mean, that to an,
Yeah, but how do you do that when the complainants will not come forward?
See, I'm not sure I buy the idea that, first of all, that Justin Trudeau had only one choice here, but secondly, that I mean, this to me points out part of the difficulties in giving the leader of a party this kind of peremptory power to suspend somebody from caucus. I agree that he has that power now. He doesn't have to, prove anything in a court of law or anything. But if it wasn't in one person's hands the way we've done it in this country, there wouldn't be the same pressure on him to act now, don't wait, don't ask questions, just suspend them, because otherwise you're going to take all kinds of
Can
flack.
we agree that on an issue like this, which is not a normal issue, it will always come down in the end to the word of one against the word of the other? So if you're a party leader, and I'm saying this in the abstract, not based on fact, and someone comes to you and says, one of your MPs raped me, are you supposed to call that MP in and say...
No,
and
but
we have no idea what the
when
actual
that
allegation
MP
is,
comes
right,
to you,
Chantal?
that female MP, and says that,
Absolutely.
are you supposed to assume that she is not going as she's entitled to in a week decide that she goes public? And when she says, I told Andrew Coyne this, and Andrew Coyne said, well, if you're not going to go to the police, I don't care.
No, that's not the
so
issue.
It's kind
That's
but this
not the issue.
happens in the real world,
But none of that's in dispute. I don't disagree with you on that at all. The question is, have a process rather than having it all come down to one person's fiat. If you have a process, it de-escalates the political pressure on that individual to make the call one way or another on the day without questions asked, without any further investigation. A process depoliticizes in that regard.
But we have
Last
a
point.
process that's called the criminal code. In theory, your process would be, I'm taking the abstract case of rape, go to the police.
Yeah.
That is a process.
If you have a complaint.
But if the woman doesn't want to go to the police, you're supposed
Well,
to
this-
ignore this story that you've just
No,
been
as I
told?
what he does is you take it to I mean, what we're seeing is nobody's developed a process for this because MP on MP issues like this are relatively rare. It's clear what you need is a process so it's not just one person making it up on the fly. That's all I'm saying.
I think we understand why there's so much tension on the Hill. It's a very, very difficult issue. So let's move on to the by-elections. Everyone always says that they're not real predictors, but then everyone ends up analyzing them to death afterwards, and people spinning for their side of what happened. So the Conservatives held on to both, but in Whitby-Oshawa, there was some movement. So the Liberals increased their vote, and the NDP fell. So what, in an election year, what does that mean, Bruce, going forward for all three parties?
Well, I do think that each of the parties can take something important from the performance that they had in these by-elections. I think Whitby-Oshawa is the most interesting one. I think the big story is that the NDP continues to have disappointing results in by-elections. It continues to look as though voters who, at least outside of Quebec, have historically been more inclined to support the Liberals than the NDP are going back to the Liberals. And the Liberals are becoming a much more competitive brand, and we see that in by-elections, including in places like Fort McMurray. I think so it's encouraging for the Liberals, even though they didn't win, and they did better than they had done, and maybe than many had even expected in Yellowhead. Is it bad for the Conservatives? Well, obviously they won too, and some are talking about how Stephen Harper has a pretty good record overall in by-elections, but this is a time when the economy is working reasonably well, where taxes are coming down, where the budget's balanced. And so you could have at least imagined that the Conservatives would have wanted a better victory than the one that they had in Whitby-Oshawa, especially given that it was Jim Flaherty's riding.
I think the Conservatives wanted a better NDP score.
Mm-hmm.
In Whitby-Oshawa, I think they're spooked by how bad the NDP score, 8% for the record, is, because all of the calculations of the Conservatives going into the next election, in particular in Ontario, are based on a reasonable split in the opposition vote. What happened in Whitby-Oshawa was the NDP vote collapsed. And if you have a general collapse in Ontario, what you have is a number of seats that start just falling to the Liberals as a result of that collapse.
Yeah.
And so while they were celebrating their victory, as they should, they were spooked by that, and they were spooked by the notion that they've just spent 2 years telling Canadians enemy number one for the Conservatives is Justin Trudeau. And having done that, they have accelerated this collapse of NDP vote.
I think the Conservatives have got to be very troubled, and this is in some ways, you might say, the fruit of their own political strategy, this sharp polarization. So it works. If you can hold on to your 30 to 40% of the vote and the other 60% or whatever is split evenly, then you do very well. If you so polarize things and so antagonize that block of voters that isn't going to vote for you, that they become determined, I'm going to vote for whoever will beat those Conservatives. And there's some sense amongst the non-Conservative vote that this is pretty baked in. Then people start saying, well, who's got the best opportunity of beating them? And the party that gets out ahead in the polls, there's a strong possibility that they get that kind of first mover advantage, if you will. If you remember at that Toronto election, for many voters it was who can beat Rob and then Doug Ford. John Tory got out ahead of Olivia Chow, and a lot of voters said, okay, then I'm going to vote for Ford because for Tory, he's got the best chance of beating Ford. So maybe something similar happening here.
So you're talking about bad news for the Conservatives, but bad news for the NDP too, right? You wrote a wonderful, flattering column of Tom Mulcair today, but the bottom line was, nice guy, not great hopes.
Well, I wrote that I thought he was an able leader, an effective leader. He had a lot of political skills and quite astute. But that the circumstance that he's in right now is quite challenging. And I think, to be honest, that he probably has spent a lot of time bolstering his relationship with the base, with the hardcore progressive voters. But increasingly, you have to look at that situation and say, is he squandering the opportunity to connect with people on the center, people who might, in certain circumstances, vote NDP, but want to know more about whether they'd upset the economy? It's not, I think, that voters really distrust the NDP on economic issues, but they don't trust them entirely. And that's work that the NDP really needs to do if their goal is to win the next election rather than just to hold on to the seats that they have. And I think the reality is that as more voters say, maybe it's time for a change, a campaign that's about holding on to what you have probably is a bad idea.
Well, and Chantal, if either opposition party is to stop Harper, they have to win a lot of seats in Quebec. Right now, it's the NDP who has most of those seats. We saw Maria Morani, big celebrated move to the NDP this week, or going to run for the NDP. How solid is the NDP in Quebec? Do they still have those 50-plus seats?
Well, I happen to think if you want to beat the Conservatives, you need to win a lot of seats in Ontario.
As well, yes.
As long as the Conservatives don't win Quebec. But yes, it would help either party, opposition party, to do well in Quebec. It's, the NDP has won these seats once. It is obviously fragile. Maria Morani went to them on the island of Montreal. I'm not sure that if she'd wanted to go to the Liberals, she would have been picked in a nomination meeting. The fact is that a high number of Quebecers want Harper out. It's the province where the Conservatives are the lowest. And at some point, what is happening outside Quebec to the NDP will matter more than a Bloc MP becoming an NDP candidate.
So we're going to wrap up in just a sec, but end of another tumultuous week of the by-elections, all this emotional stuff about the MPs. What's changed this week, in the by-elections overall?
I think what's interesting to me is this is after a period in which I think we all said that the Trudeau and the Liberals had not been performing terribly well on a lot of these important issues. And lo and behold, we have another by-election. They do just as well as they've done in every by-election since he came in as the leader. I think this confirms that the NDP is in a lot of trouble. I'm not so sure that I agree with Bruce. I don't think the centrist voter is, I don't think that's the project anymore. I think it's saved the furniture. I mean, they've had a series of bad results, not only in by-elections, but in mayoral elections that they were supposed to do well in. In Quebec, they can't be guaranteed anything in Quebec anymore. They're really going to have to hold on.
Thanks so much, guys. We're out of time.